What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. 10 most undervalued and overvalued players, going over all positions today, giving you at least one player that's overvalued and undervalued at each position. And I'm going to try and talk about some new names. You guys know the players I really like, really don't like. So I tried to think of a list of 10 players I don't talk about as much. Before we start, of course, gotta do the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was which quarterback led the league in yards per carry on third downs. The answer was Patrick Mahomes at 12 yards per carry. Today's stat, which 2019 rookie wide receiver led all rookies in red zone targets? All right, let's talk about some players who are over and undervalued. We're going to go position by position, and we're going to start off with quarterback, and we're going to do a quarterback that is currently undervalued, and that's Teddy Bridgewater. He has everything going for him, and in most leagues, honestly, he's just not even being drafted. Coming off the board as a quarterback 24. Sometimes you get there in a one quarterback league, but usually not. Two quarterback league, obviously, everyone gets taken, but in a one quarterback league, he's been undrafted. And first up, I want to mention his mobility. I think that's one thing that people don't really know what to do with, because he was a little bit mobile when he was starting back in the day before the major leg injury, but then he didn't scramble as much on the Saints. So there's a legitimate question: is he going to provide you anything with his legs? My take on that is that he will. He was filling in for Breeze, so right off the bat, these plays do not have, very many bootlegs written into them, right? Like they're not designed for a quarterback to scramble. But also, they knew they could win a lot of these games if he just played as a game manager. They did not want Teddy to go out there and just chuck the ball downfield. They wanted him to get the ball to the really good players on the offense. Get the ball to Thomas, get the ball to Kamara, and it worked. They were winning games with Teddy at quarterback. They did not need him to throw deep. They did not need him to run. And did he really want to? I mean, did he want to get up and scramble? Like, this was his opportunity to show the league he can be a starting quarterback. So why on earth, especially with as good of an offensive line as they had, why would he risk getting hit? He's just not going to. That would be dumb on his part. So he played it smart. He won games. He got the ball to the skill players that needed to get the ball to, and that's why he's got this good contract. But now that he has the contract, he is a starting quarterback, he's going to want to prove that, yeah, this is worth the money. I am a good quarterback. I can make things happen. And I think he's going to return to what he used to be doing. He's not a guy that's going to go out there and get you like 500 rushing yards. So just throw that out of your head. That's not going to happen. But he can be around like 200 rushing yards, maybe run in for 2 or 3 scores, and that's just going to help his floor and his ceiling. But that's not the main reason we want him. I just wanted to go over it because it is something that a lot of people are going to question. The main reason is a combination of just a terrible defense mixed with really good skill players. They have probably the worst defense in the league, and that means not only are they going to be down a lot, but even when they're ahead, they're not going to be able to just play really conservative and hold a lead, because the defense is going to let people right back into games. That's really good news for his pass attempt numbers. So when you consider that he also gets to throw to McCaffrey, Moore, Anderson, Samuel, Ian Thomas, those are some really, really nice names, because it's a great mix of guys who are great short and great deep. So he's got plenty of guys that he can throw to deep, plenty of guys who can get open short and medium, and he is going to throw the ball deeper. Remember, he had the low ADOT on the Saints, but what did I just talk about? They wanted him to be a game manager and get the ball to Michael Thomas and Kamara. Name a quarterback who's going to have a deep ADOT that is getting the ball to Michael Thomas and Kamara. Neither of those guys run deep routes, and so there was never going to be an outcome where Bridgewater had a deep ADOT. We threw the ball deep downfield. But it's going to be better this season. They're going to make him more aggressive because he's actually going to need to be more aggressive to win games. And one final point on him is they play the Raiders in week 1, a game that could definitely turn into a shootout. But at the very least, it's a really good matchup. So he's a guy that you take him late and you say, let's just see. Let's see how this offense runs. Let's see how good he looks. If he plays poorly, he's still probably going to get you a decent amount of points in week 1 to where you can find someone else on free agency if you don't like what happened. So at the very least, he's going to be fine in week 1 and then you can bench him. But we're going to find out, and I think he's still going to get you enough points to be worth it. So he is one of the very few quarterbacks I do have listed as targets this season. And if you do want to see the rest of them, then they're right here, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Next up, Aaron Rodgers. Being overvalued, honestly, as a quarterback 12. They've made it pretty clear that they want to run the ball this season, and he just has no one in the receiving game besides Adams. I mean, I know Lazard is okay, and maybe Funchess can have a few good games, but he's got no one he can rely on, and it's not like Adams is going to have 3,000 receiving yards. Like, he's going to do exceptional, but he's not magic. Like, he can't have that many receiving yards, and that's what he basically need for Rodgers to be worth this sort of ADP. And the Packers finished 16th in rush attempts last season, and it just feels like they really want to improve on that number, get closer to the top 10. And if that happens, I don't see Rodgers finishing 8th in pass attempts. And if that goes down, then he's not that likely to overperform his points per game last season, which he'll need to do to pay off his ADP. So for me, Rodgers is a no as a low-end quarterback 1. I think he's more of a mid-range quarterback 2. Moving on to tight ends, we have 2 more names. First up is Hayden Hurst. He's coming off the board as the tight end 12, and I've decided that's a mistake. It's actually taken me a while to fully get my take finalized on Hurst. I've kind of been looking at both directions. Maybe he's not all that good, but then also look at this opportunity. I wasn't fully sure on his value. I am definitely on board at this point as a tight end 12. I took him in the 9th round as the tight end 12 in the Scott Fish Bowl, and the 9th round in a tight end premium league, I feel is a fantastic spot to get him, and I really feel like he's going to fall in a few hometown leagues. You've heard it on our channel so many times, but the Falcons have the most vacated targets in the league by a mile, and a ton of those targets are from the tight end, obviously with Hooper leaving to the Browns. So when you consider, okay, well, does he have competition? Like, maybe Hayden Hurst isn't that good and someone passes him. Well, as long as he's better than Kerry Lee, Jaden Graham, Carson Meyer, which he is, right? He's definitely better than those guys. Like, he's going to be fine. He's going to have an every down role, and that's the biggest possible upgrade he could make. I do not want to understate this change in situation. He's going from being the 3rd most targeted tight end on a team that was 29th in pass attempts per game to being the top tight end on the top passing offense in football. He could easily have 100 targets this season, and that would make him a top 5 tight end. I mean, Hooper finished as a tight end 6 last season by a good amount, missing 3 weeks. So Hurst has incredible upside this season, and he does have the skill set to produce if he gets these targets, and he probably doesn't even need 100 targets. If you told me he was going to get 80 targets, I still think he's a good value, but the upside is just incredible. So I think he's a really good pick. Someone who I don't love as much is Jared Cook. I am not on the Cook hype train. I've seen a lot of people starting to hop on, and I don't really get it. He did not have a 100-yard game at all last season. He went over 4 receptions twice, and all of his value came on touchdowns. And he was just extremely lucky in that area. I mean, he had 5 touchdowns on his last 11 receptions and a 21% touchdown rate overall. 21% touchdown rate. Are you kidding me? He's not going to repeat that. Like, that's absolutely insane. I know he's on the Saints, but Kamara is not going to have 6 touchdowns this season. Like, Kamara was incredibly unlucky and Cook was lucky. That's going to flip-flop. right? He's not going to repeat a 21% touchdown rate. You know how many tight ends have had 9 or more touchdowns on 65 or fewer targets? How many other tight ends other than what Cook just did? 6 ever. And only Gronk was able to repeat that production in the following season. But Jared Cook is not Gronk, right? He's going to regress. And he just doesn't see enough total volume to make up for it when he does. So if he's seeing not 9 touchdowns on his 65 targets, he's seeing 5 or 6 touchdowns, he's just not going to be able to repeat top 10 tight end numbers. On to wide receiver, and the first guy up is Terry McLaurin. McLaurin is effectively free right now, and the scary part is he's free in paid leagues. Like, for all these videos, I'm using ADP in paid leagues, which are more competitive than hometown leagues, and these are with people who are paying attention. So people paying attention right now are still just completely not looking at Terry McLaurin, which is absurd. I mean, there are going to be so many hometown leagues where no one wants to take Washington's top wide receiver, and he's going to fall even further. But that's a mistake. I mean, he should be a mid to high end wide receiver 2, and he's going as a wide receiver 3 everywhere. I mean, seriously, who else is Haskins going to throw to? Right? It's McLaurin, it's Sims, it's Antonio Gandy-Golden, who's not going to get that many targets. They don't have a great tight end. They don't have running backs who are going to just hog targets. Like, they have running backs who they'll throw to, but no one that's going to hog a bunch of targets. McLaurin is just going to eat, and that's assuming that Haskins remains bad. So he's incredibly undervalued if Haskins remains bad. But remember, Haskins was high on a lot of people's draft boards last season, so it's not like an incredible leap to think that he might approach league average. Like, that's not a crazy thing to say. We shouldn't just write him off after 200 total attempts. And if he can resemble anything remotely close to a league average quarterback, McLaurin could easily finish as a wide receiver 1, but at worst, he's going to outperform his ADP. And another player similar to that, but that is basically being taken at their floor, is Julian Edelman. And I was completely off Edelman when Stidham was the quarterback, but now Newton is, and his ADP isn't changing, which is just baffling to me. How can people continue to draft him at the same spot when we thought Stidham was going to be the quarterback, and now Cam Newton's the quarterback? Like, do people only remember what happened in the previous season? Has everyone just completely forgotten how good Cam is? He's a stud, and he excels in the quick game. He excels in these quick passes, these dump-offs, which is exactly where Edelman dominates. So given that since 2013, Edelman has been the wide receiver 21, 16, 8, 20, season with torn ACL, then 14 and 13, his ADP of the wide receiver 35 is pretty confusing, right? Like, how good do people think Brady was these last 2 years? He was good, but there was an obvious drop-off. So thinking that Cam is just going to completely tank Edelman's value is just odd to me. Stidham, yes, that was true. But you've got to adjust his ADP when they upgrade to a former MVP in Cam Newton. So I don't understand why that's not happening, but Edelman is a phenomenal value right now. 2 players, 2 wide receivers, who are not phenomenal values are Mike Evans and Cooper Kupp. Do Mike Evans first. Now, my problem with Evans is not the talent, and it's really not as much the situation. He's an elite wide receiver, and he's probably going to end up as a wide receiver 1. But he's going as a wide receiver 7 in the late second round, and I just think the opportunity cost right there is too high. You know, he's not that much different than the next 15 wide receivers off the board, but by taking him in the late second, you're missing out on the 2 elite quarterbacks. Obviously, I'm talking about Mahomes and Lamar. You're missing out on the top end tight ends, and you're missing out on the final tier 2 running backs. So if you're comfortable skipping out on all of those to grab Evans, I guess go for it. But I'm not comfortable doing that, and so I don't understand how that's valuable to your team. Like, I don't think you can look back at the end of your draft and be like, you know what? I'm glad I took Mike Evans in round 2 because you missed out on so much. It's about opportunity cost. You can get nearly identical production rounds later, so you should do it. And similarly, we have Cooper Kupp. You know, he's going as the wide receiver 12 right now, which is way too high. I mean, he's my wide receiver 19, and I think at 19, I'm a little bit scared to even take him there. Why would you take Cooper Kupp in the late third round? That doesn't even make sense. It's the same thing as Evans. You probably can't get Mahomes or Lamar, but there are still the final elite running backs. There are probably still some elite tight ends, and you can't tell me that Cooper Kupp is significantly better than Allen Robinson, Odell, Ridley, A.J. Brown, Woods, Chark, McLaurin. All those guys are going after him, and most of them are going 1 to 2 rounds later. That's crazy. Kupp really fell off when they switched out of 3 wide receiver sets into 2 wide receiver sets, dropping to the wide receiver 31 from weeks 9 through 17. This offense changed. They were not running 3 wide receivers, they were running 2 wide receivers, and that's when they had Brandon Cooks. Now they don't even have him. They're definitely going to stick with 2 wide receiver sets, and that's not good for Kupp. He's not as good at winning on the outside. He wins on the inside against zone. But that doesn't happen as much when he's on the outside, and so it's much more difficult for him to produce really good numbers. So I don't get his ADP at all. I do not think there's even a case for taking him as wide receiver 12. On running back now, and like I said earlier, I'm trying to bring up some new names. So while you guys know I like Miles Sanders, Geis, Moss, I don't like Aaron Jones, Fournette, Mostert, Singletary. I talk about them a lot, so I'm going to try and bring up some new names here. First up, James Conner. The case for James Conner is pretty simple. He's a running back 1 when he's healthy, and even though he's gotten hurt recently, you can't tell me that he's like a significantly higher injury risk than Carson, Bell, David Johnson, all going in that same range. And do they have the same ceiling Conner does? I know they have a really high ceiling, but James Conner could be a top 5 running back if everything goes right this season. I don't know, maybe David Johnson, but Bell's not going to be a top 5 running back. Carson's very unlikely to be a top 5 running back, and it's not like he's more risky. Have we completely forgotten 2018 when he was 7th in points per game, tied with Zeke? He's the clear lead back on this offense. He was clearly the lead back last season before the injuries. I know they drafted Anthony McLaurin, but he's just a change of pace back. And given that we expect this offense to be significantly better this season, he's a great pick. And also, the defense should remain elite. So they're going to have games where they need to lean on the running game late. It's not going to be with McLaurin. I think people just forget how good the offense was prior to last season. But Big Ben is back. Conner and Juju are healthy. Deontay Johnson and James Washington are both ready to take steps forward. And so I want the lead back on that offense as much as possible, especially when he's being drafted as a low-end running back too. Great value. Final player we're going to go over today is a running back who's overvalued. That's Kerryon Johnson. I don't really see the point in drafting Kerryon Johnson in the 8th round where he's going. Even though it's the late 8th round, I don't get it. Like, DeAndre Swift is universally considered the superior running back, and at the very least, it's going to ensure that Johnson only gets the early down work. So even if Johnson stays healthy this season, which is something he just can't seem to do, but even if he does, he's not going to have any receptions. Like, Swift is the better receiving back and the better back overall. They're not just going to be like, oh, well, when we were featuring Johnson, when they were featuring him, they still refused to use him in the receiving game. Now all of a sudden he's going to be the receiving back? No, of course not. They're going to use Swift as the receiving back and as a lot of early downs, so Johnson's going to have much fewer carries, and they're only going to be carries, and that's not valuable in fantasy. And then you think, well, maybe he has upside if Swift got injured. Well, that's a little bit early to be taking the backup in the 8th round, but also, does he? Because he has one career game over 19 fantasy points, still took him 2 touchdowns, and he barely went over. Like, he just doesn't have a ceiling, and that's not someone you take in the 8th round. You do not take a player that needs the better running back to get hurt, and even then isn't actually that great in fantasy in the 8th round. That doesn't make any sense. There are much better options. So, those are 10 players who are being over and undervalued in fantasy this season. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But that's the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? But thanks for watching.